Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we are going to be building some trees using armatures and lichen. I've already built a couple of three right here. This one here I sprayed with some Loctite spray adhesive and then sprinkled flock on it. Now I'm going to be using the Elmer's spray adhesive today because of the discoloration that I felt that the Loctite gave it. Elmer's claims to dry clear. Now these trees out here are done with a different method. I'm using clump foliage, which the clump foliage on the armatures was starting to come off. It's just falling off. It's loose. It's not affixed very well, and so that's an armature that I used over the last 6 months or so gaming, and you can see that the spray adhesive also was leaving a residue on the armature itself. And so we're going to strip these. I'm going to go through and I'm going to take all of the clump foliage off, save what I can, because I'm going to use this clump foliage maybe later when I'm building my terrain tiles. I think I'm going to be using these for various scrub brushes. I could put them on bases. I could make hedges and just accentuate other different models with this clump foliage. And so I'm going to strip them off the trees. I thought that was basically a waste of clump foliage. Okay, now when I clear these armatures, I'm just rubbing them off and just coming right out, and they're just falling off. But there is a little bit of residue that sticks on the armature, and that's okay, because in the background or it'll be underneath the lichen, and so it'll actually be disguised and it'll look just fine. Nobody will notice it, and if they do, it still looks really good. Okay, so it's going to take me a second to get all of this off, and once I do, I'll be right back. All right, now that the tree armatures are cleared, we're going to go ahead and pull out some of my lichen, and we're going to cherry pick. We're going to go through various pieces, and I want the big chunks. I want the big pieces. Those are the ones that we're going to be using on the trees. We're not going to be using the little broken, flattened, torn up pieces. Those we can just leave in the tub later for hedgerows or something. Disguise roads or rivers, just on tabletop bushes and things like that. So give me a second. I'm going to go through and I'm going to cherry pick. Now I've decided to take these out and put the discarded ones into the box and put the ones I've cherry picked off to the side. So that was the first wave. Now let me go ahead, and I saw one that I liked. I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and use that one too. Pour a little bit more out. It looks like you're going to get about 50% of your lichen will be usable for these trees or this method of making trees, and the other 50% won't be. So I might need to go get another bag just so that I could have a lot of extra. And that piece right there is really chunky. It's nice and large. Mainly so that I can have more lichen for the table, as well as to finish up these trees, because I realized I was starting to run out of the big chunky pieces of lichen. All right, once I get all these picked out or cherry picked, I'll be right back. Now that my armatures are clear and that I have my lichen cherry picked, we get some E6000 or Gorilla Glue, and we're just going to coat one of the arms of the armature with the glue. And you can see that I'm putting it on very heavy. That's okay. That's preferable. And you want to cover all the little branches off of any one of the armatures. And then you grab a piece of lichen or two. Find one that you like best. And it's got an outer side and an inner side. The outer side is the puffy side, the rounded side, and the inner side is the part that was torn or has the roots, or the narrow part. Now when you put it on the armature, be sure to squeeze a little bit and let the glue grab the entire piece of lichen. Maybe even go all the way through the lichen. The lichen is porous, so let the glue kind of get a good grip on it. If you see a branch sticking out, needs a little extra love, get a smaller piece that you weren't using as a big chunk, and just stick it on there. And you're going to do this with all of the armature arms. And I work from the bottom, work my way up. Use the biggest pieces of lichen on the bottom, and then just gradually shrink the size of the lichen as I work up. You have to kind of eyeball it and judge it based on the size of your armature. Apply some more glue, and you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see a lot of glue being applied and a lot of lichen being applied. Try to get it up underneath that next branch. It's okay to put it on sideways. It's okay to put it on with the pointed part going towards the trunk, but don't put it on with the big rounded end towards the inside and then the point sticking out. You don't want that. Well, maybe you do want that. Just depends on the type of tree you're trying to accomplish. On a small little branch like this, we're not going to use a big chunky piece of lichen. We're going to find a smaller, more manageable piece. Something that's just about the size of the armature arm. I had to go to my bucket because the ones I had pulled out were all the big chunks. Found a good spot, good piece, put it on there. Now, it's okay if the colors of your lichen are different, because that gives your model a three-dimensional look as opposed to, well, it's already a three-dimensional model, but the colors really bring out the three dimensions. And have you ever looked at a tree? It's not perfectly the same color everywhere all the time anyway, so that works out just fine. Now, this piece, you'll notice it might be a little bit big for that arm, but that's okay. Because when you put it in there and you tuck and squeeze and push, what's happening is the glue is seeping in between the different porous holes of the lichen. I realized I put it on backwards. I put it on with a big rounded spot on the facing inwards, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Okay. And so I had to turn it around because you want the rounded, big puffy part on the outside. All right, now we're going to continue on. Now, if you notice, these are lifelike. No, what are these? Woodland Scenics. These are Woodland Scenics armatures, and they come flat, and you have to pull the arms out yourself, and you have to twist the trunk. This is a little bit of a chore, but you have to take the trunk and twist it in like a spiral, and what winds up happening is your armatures go up the tree kind of in a spiral. So you have to fight the desire to make a spiral tree by going back and maybe filling in some empty gaps. But as you put it together, it'll all come it'll all reveal itself as you start putting it together. There are these little bitty branches inside as well. They're just little sticks that poke out. It's good for helping hold the model together, but it's also good for filling in all those little gaps I just mentioned. Now you might have noticed I put some glue on the lichen itself, and that's perfectly fine. I meant to do that so that when you put the next piece on, you can have it attached to the armature and to the lower piece of lichen. Okay, working our way up the tree. There's little wires inside the armatures, and if they're not shaped the way you want them, just bend them the way you want them and everything will be fine. Sometimes it's good to pick the piece of lichen you're going to use before you apply the glue. That way you know what you're going to be putting on there. Yes, I am putting a lot of glue on. Find the point, have it go towards the trunk and the big rounded part of the lichen to the outside. It's like little wedges. Be sure to, if you notice, I'm doing this on wax paper because a lot of the glue on the bottom drips down and it might even cause, you might damage your workbench or table or something like that, or it'll glue it down if you let it sit for a few minutes. So I use wax paper in case any drips come off the lichen. All right, let's continue on working our way up this. And I'm saying the same thing over and over, you might have noticed, but that's okay. This process doesn't take that long. You know, you could do a whole forest in an hour probably. Well, depending on how many trees are in your forest. Just kind of visually inspecting it just to make sure everything's sticking the way it belongs. And then we go on to the next armature. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next I'm going to jump to when I actually do something different. Okay, so now we're all the way to the top. Now the top has some little points that stick straight up, and it has a little bit of the left and right of the armature at the top. Now instead of laying something down on those arms, I take one piece of lichen and I push it onto the armature from the top, right? So it's facing upwards. And then I spread it out so that it goes on top of those branches. Just trying to find a nice small piece that would go make a good cap for the top of the tree. And then I push it straight down. Onto the glue, I make sure it all sticks. I stretch a little bit just to make sure I can get it over all the armatures. Great. Now just visually inspecting it, you can kind of see that there's a hole in the side that I don't like. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill that hole. All right, so we're going to just apply some glue directly to the surrounding lichen and maybe the trunk itself, because there's just a big opening on that side. Remember how the tree spiraled up? Well, that's an area of the spiral that was just open excessively. So you notice how I put a lot of glue on there, and then I'm just going to tuck a piece of lichen in there, mainly just to fill up that hole. This is where you just do a visual inspection. If there's any dangling lichen or any lichen, just trim it off, and that's what I'm doing. All right, so now I'm going to do a couple more armatures, and then when I get them all done, we'll be back to the next step. All right, the next step is to actually apply flock to the Lichen. Now on this one, I applied some really thick, coarse, they call it fallen leaves or something like that. Now make sure you put a plastic glove on, or a rubber glove, because when you spray, you could get some of that glue actually on your hands, and this way you don't have to get any glue on your hands. Now, because if you notice that one that's already finished, I did that months ago. I sprayed the model brown and then flocked it, and it came very dark and dingy. Now this one, I'm going to leave it the Lichen colors. I'm going to spray it with the Elmer's, which dries clear, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with the same coarse flock, very light green. Okay, now as you see here, I am sprinkling it very lightly, rotating it around, and basically just giving the Lichen like an additional leafy look with the fallen leaves. Now these fallen leaves are from Bush. Bush makes a lot of flock, and I get it from a hobby link. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and set that off to the side, and let's start with another one. Okay, so we've got a blended turf here also from Woodland Scenics. This is the earth tone, the blended earth. All right, so let me go ahead and spray it, and then when I come back, we sprinkle it on. Now this is a very light, very thin flock, so it could easily come out of my fingers as I sprinkle extra heavy. So I'm trying to be very careful not to over flock it. But even though I was being very careful, I felt it clumped up quite a bit, because it was kind of like, I don't know, like a powdery flock, but it still came out looking pretty good. All right, let's get it all over the top of the model, top of the Lichen, and shake off the excess. Looks good. Looks pretty good. They all have their own little look to them. Okay, let's try another flock. All right, and now we're going to use the dark green scatter. It's a flock, but it's called scatter because it's more of a larger. What am I doing? Why can't I get this all straight? Okay, here we go. Sprinkle it on, and it's dark green. I'm using, actually, this is the fine scatter now that I think about it. This is the fine scatter. I use this to highlight models. I don't actually use this usually as a complete model cover, like a base cover or something like that. I usually use this just to highlight corners and rocks and stuff like that. But since I had it, I thought I'd put it on a tree. I thought it would make the tree look really cool, being the dark color that it is. All right, maybe you can be the judge of that. Looks pretty good, I think. All right, let's move on to the next color. All right, now the last one is my light green scatter. It's also a very fine, this is what I usually cover the 90% of my miniature bases with, is this light green Bosch scatter. Now I've been using this primarily on my Napoleonics and my American War of Independence, but I switched over to the Army Painter grass green on my miniatures, but so I thought that it would be a good opportunity for using this on a tree to see if it would actually look good on a tree. So we've got a large variety of, I think it looks really good. I think it probably is the best. All right, let's take a look at all of them together. All right, this is the original one with the brown undercoat. I sprayed the Lichen brown to make the underside, knowing that I was going to cover it with that light green, but it just makes it look too dark. And then this is the exact same flock as the first one, but just with no brown undercoat. It's just straight lichen underneath. And it looks pretty good. And I used the Elmer's spray glue instead of the Loctite spray glue. The Loctite spray glue leaves a little bit white residue, where the Elmer's does actually dry clear, as you can see here. Now this one I sprinkled the blended earth. It is kind of a brownish yellow, but over the lichen it still looks good. It just looks like maybe a wintry color. And then that's the light green. I think is probably the best, to be honest. That's the light green, but it's real thick, and then that's the light green, but it's real thin flock. This is ground scatter. I think that might be the best one. And then that's the dark green. Those are the two colors that I use on miniature bases to kind of give a dual tone grass. Dark green looks good. And then that is the bare bones plain lichen, which looks fine as it is, but it looks like it's going to need a coating as well. Probably the light green ground scatter. That's probably the way I'm going to go with that. All right, so this is all of them. This is what they look like. Brown is okay. The dark green is okay, and they'll look good. And it's really up to you to decide which one you like the best. This heavy scatter on this one, the first two, it looks a little bit too heavy. It doesn't look to scale with a tree. It looks too thick. Alright guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more terrain building or model building videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification icon. And we are in the process of doing a lot of terrain for the Market Garden campaign, so keep your eyes tuned, and I'll see you next time.